Weddings are supposed to be about beginnings, new chapters, fresh starts, families coming together. That's what I told myself as I stood in the reception hall, watching my daughter-in-law glide from table to table in a dress that cost more than my first car. She looked radiant, calculated, glowing in that way people do when they believe the day belongs entirely to them. I'd already written the check for the rehearsal dinner, paid for the floral upgrade when her mother miscalculated, covered the open bar when my son admitted their budget was tight. But that wasn't enough. It's never enough when entitlement gets comfortable. She approached me halfway through the reception, champagne in hand, smile sharp at the edges. "We need to talk," she said. Not please, not later, just a statement. I followed her toward the side corridor near the ballroom doors. Music thumped behind us. Laughter echoed. No one noticed we'd stepped away. "You embarrassed me," she said flatly. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You told Aunt Carol you weren't ready to give up your house yet." Ah, there it was. My $500,000 house, paid off, quietly maintained, the one she'd been hinting about for months. "You promised you'd consider helping us," she continued, lowering her voice. "You made it sound like it was happening." "I said I would think about helping," I replied calmly, "not that I was handing over my home." Her jaw tightened. "You don't even need it," she said. "It's too big for you now." I stared at her. It's fascinating how quickly people reassign ownership in their minds. "You're not entitled to my property," I said evenly. That's when she did it. Quick, sharp, loud enough to echo against the marble floor. She slapped me. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to humiliate. The sound cut through the music. Two bridesmaids froze mid-laugh. My son turned. Her eyes widened instantly, not in regret, in miscalculation. She thought I would crumble, cry, make a scene, beg not to ruin her day. Instead, I straightened my posture. I didn't raise my hand, didn't shout. I simply looked at her and said one sentence. "You have no idea what you just did." That unsettled her more than anger would have. My son rushed over. "Mom, what happened?" "She's overreacting," my daughter-in-law snapped. "She's refusing to support us after everything we've planned." Interesting framing. Support. As if refusing to give someone a $500,000 asset was betrayal. I touched my cheek once, calmly. "You should go enjoy your reception," I told her. Then I walked back into the ballroom like nothing had happened. But something had, and it wasn't the slap. It was the final confirmation that I'd been right to hesitate. Because long before the wedding, I had already sensed something, and I had already taken steps she didn't know about. By the time the honeymoon ended, the house she thought she could pressure out of me would be the least of her concerns. The thing about entitlement is, it rarely starts loud. It starts with suggestions, little comments at dinner. "Have you ever thought about downsizing? You don't need all that space anymore. It must be hard keeping up with a house that big." At first, I brushed it off. Newly engaged couples talk like the world is a group project. I figured she was just excited, dreaming out loud. But then the tone shifted. My son started using phrases that weren't his. "We're trying to build something, Mom. We need a foundation. We could raise kids there." There. Not someday, not if. There. In my house. It was subtle but consistent. Every holiday, every visit.
The assumption grew stronger. And here's the part she didn't understand about me. I may be quiet, but I'm never unaware. 3 months before the wedding, I invited my son over for coffee. Alone, no drama, no accusations, just conversation.
I asked him point blank, "Are you expecting me to give you the house?" He hesitated. That told me everything. "We thought maybe eventually," he admitted. "We," that word again. "You didn't buy it," I said calmly. "You didn't maintain it. You didn't sit in it alone after your father passed. This house isn't a gift card." He looked uncomfortable, torn. "I just don't want tension," he said. Translation, he didn't want to disappoint her. And that's when I knew something crucial. This wasn't about stability. It was about leverage. She wanted security, but not the kind you build, the kind you inherit. So while they were busy planning seating charts and tasting menus, I made an appointment. Not with a real estate agent, with an estate attorney. You see, I wasn't against helping them. I was against being cornered. During that meeting, I made a decision that felt heavy but necessary. I transferred the house into a trust, irrevocable, untouchable without my consent. And I updated my will, not to punish, but to protect. The house would remain in the family, eventually, but not under pressure, not under coercion, and certainly not under public humiliation. Back at the wedding reception, after the slap, I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt, fear. Because the moment I didn't explode, she realized something. She had misjudged me. My son approached me later that night, eyes tired. "She didn't mean it," he said quietly. "They never do," I replied. He ran a hand through his hair. "Can we just move past this?" "Of course," I said calmly, and I meant it. I was already past it. Because here's the twist she didn't see coming. The trust wasn't the only thing finalized before that wedding. There was another document, signed, filed, and triggered the moment she decided to make my home a public negotiation tactic. She thought the slap was power. It wasn't. It was a signal, and signals activate consequences. By the time they boarded their honeymoon flight, the first domino had already fallen. They left for their honeymoon 2 days later. Italy, Lake Como, private villa, all curated for the kind of photos that make people think life is effortless. I didn't call them before they left, didn't text, didn't mention the slap again. That probably unsettled her more than confrontation would have. Silence creates space, and space makes people think. 3 days into their trip, I got the notification I'd been waiting for. Paperwork processed, recorded, effective immediately. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. Because what I had done wasn't revenge, it was correction. The house was now fully protected inside the trust. But that wasn't the real shift. The real shift was financial. You see, for the past 2 years, I had been quietly assisting my son's business venture. Small loans, temporary coverage, bridge payments when cash flow ran thin. All informal, all verbal, all maternal. Until recently. 6 months before the wedding, when her house comments became frequent, I converted everything into formal agreements, signed promissory notes, structured repayment terms. Not because I wanted to collect, because I wanted clarity. That paperwork had a clause, a simple one. In the event of documented hostility or coercion tied to financial expectation, the loans would accelerate, due immediately. It wasn't aggressive, it was protective. And a public slap over property qualifies as hostility, especially when witnesses are present. The attorney had advised me to wait, to see if she would apologize. She didn't, so I triggered the clause. Lake Como is beautiful this time of year. I imagine the sun was setting when my son's phone rang. Unknown number, his accountant, then his bank, then the attorney's email. Subject line, notice of acceleration. I didn't hear the call, obviously, but I know my son. His breathing would have changed first. He would have reread the email twice,
Then 3 times. Then he would have called me, which he did. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the text. Mom, what is this? Not angry, panicked. I waited an hour before replying. We can talk when you're home. Her message came 10 minutes later from his phone. Are you seriously doing this right now? Right now, as if timing had not been her weapon first. I didn't respond. Because here's something she never understood about me. I don't escalate emotionally. I escalate structurally. By the time they landed back in the States, 3 days earlier than planned, the situation was very clear. The loans were real, the terms were binding, and the house, completely unreachable. They came straight to my front door from the airport. No luggage smile, no honeymoon glow, just tension. My son knocked softly. She stood behind him, arms crossed. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he began. No, I said gently, there hasn't. Her voice cut in sharp. You are punishing us because I lost my temper. No, I corrected. I'm responding because you revealed yours. Silence. That's when it finally hit her. This wasn't about a house. It was about respect. And she had mistaken mine for weakness. The power dynamic she thought she established at that wedding, it evaporated the moment consequences became measurable. My son looked at me differently then, not like a parent, like a creditor, and that shift hurt. But clarity often does. She thought the slap would secure her future. Instead, it accelerated it. And for the first time since that reception hall, she looked uncertain, not angry, uncertain, because she realized something terrifying. I had never been bluffing. They didn't argue on my doorstep. That surprised me. She wanted to. I could see it in the tightness of her jaw. But numbers have a way of muting outrage. You can yell at a person. You can't yell at paperwork. My son asked if we could sit down. I agreed, not because I owed them comfort, but because clarity deserves a table. He placed his phone between us, email open. Mom, this says the full balance is due within 30 days. Yes. You never said it worked like that. I did, I replied calmly. You just didn't read carefully. His eyes flicked to her. She shifted uncomfortably. This is extreme, she said. All of this over a misunderstanding at a wedding? There it was again, minimizing. It wasn't the slap, I said evenly. It was the assumption behind it. She leaned forward. We were counting on that house. I never offered it. You implied. I did not. Silence. That's when my son finally asked the question he should have asked months ago. Why would you do this to us? That one hurt. Not because it accused me, but because it revealed how deeply he'd reframed the situation. I didn't do anything to you, I said. I formalized what already existed. He ran his hand through his hair again, a nervous habit he's had since he was 12. We can't cover that balance right now, he admitted. Of course they couldn't. Their business was leveraged, their lifestyle stretched.
Their honeymoon extended on credit. Confidence is expensive when it isn't earned. She stood up abruptly. This is manipulation, she snapped. You're trying to control us. That almost made me laugh. Projection is loudest when it's closest to the truth. No, I said quietly. Control is assuming someone's property is already yours. That landed hard. My son's expression changed then. Something subtle but important. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at her. And for the first time, I saw calculation in his eyes. Not toward me, toward the situation. Because here's the twist she didn't see coming. He hadn't known about the clause. Not fully. She'd handled most of the house conversations. She'd reassured him I would cave eventually. That pressure works if applied consistently. She underestimated something critical. My son may be emotional, but he is not reckless with debt. When we finished talking, they left quietly. No dramatic exit, no slammed door, but tension walked out with them. Over the next 2 weeks, repayment discussions turned serious, assets evaluated, lines of credit explored, and something else started happening. The cracks between them widened. Pressure does that. The fantasy of the wedding glow fades quickly when financial reality sets in. I heard through a mutual friend that arguments had become frequent about money, about miscommunication, about expectations. She began calling me directly, first politely, then urgently. Can we restructure? Can we extend? You're putting strain on the marriage. That last one was interesting because I hadn't created strain, I had exposed it. I declined to renegotiate, not cruelly, firmly. If you need flexibility, I told her, you should have approached me with respect. She went quiet after that. And here's where the dynamic truly flipped. My son started coming alone. Not to argue, to understand. That's when I realized something she hadn't anticipated. The pressure wasn't breaking him, it was clarifying him. And clarity inside a new marriage, that's dangerous territory. Especially when one partner realizes the other gambled too aggressively. She thought the slap established dominance. Instead, it triggered scrutiny. And scrutiny is far more lethal than anger. 30 days passed faster than any of them expected. Deadlines have a way of sobering people. The repayment didn't come in one dramatic lump sum. It came in uncomfortable pieces. Liquidated investments, restructured debt, emergency lines of credit pulled in ways that left bruises on their balance sheet. They managed it, barely. But that wasn't the real shift. The real shift happened 2 weeks before the deadline, when my son came over alone again. No tension this time, no defensiveness, just exhaustion. He didn't sit right away. He stood near the kitchen window, the same one he used to lean against as a teenager when he needed advice but didn't want to ask for it. She pushed too hard, he said finally. I didn't respond. She thought if we made it public, if we made it emotional, you'd fold. There it was, the strategy. Not a misunderstanding, not a temper issue, a tactic. He let out a slow breath.
I didn't see it clearly until now. Pressure does that. It removes performance. It exposes intention. She said the house would anchor our future, he continued. But it was never about stability. It was about status. That word hung between us. Status. A wedding venue to impress. A house to showcase. A life curated for perception. I love her, he added quietly, but I don't know if I trust her judgment. That was the moment I knew the outcome had already been decided. Not by me, not by the trust, not by the clause, by clarity. A week later, she came over, alone. Her confidence had changed. Not gone, refined. I miscalculated, she said without sitting down. That surprised me, not the admission, the phrasing. You thought I was sentimental, she continued, that you'd prioritize keeping the peace. I do prioritize peace, I replied calmly, just not at the expense of respect. She swallowed. I thought pressure would move you. It did, I said. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, just not in the direction you wanted. Silence. Then she asked the question she should have asked from the beginning. Is the house ever going to be ours? I held her gaze. The house was never the point. And here is the final twist she truly never saw coming. 2 months before the wedding, before the slap, before the demand, I had already amended the trust. The house wasn't set to transfer directly to my son. It was set to transfer to any future grandchildren, protected, deferred, untouchable by spouses, not as punishment, as insulation. If their marriage thrived, wonderful, the children would benefit. If it didn't, the house would remain beyond conflict. It was never leverage, it was legacy. She processed that slowly. So even if we'd handled everything perfectly, you still wouldn't have owned it, I finished gently. Her shoulders dropped, not in defeat, in understanding, because for the first time she saw the full picture. This wasn't about money. It was about patience meeting strategy. The slap at the wedding wasn't what cost her control. It was the assumption behind it. She assumed urgency would override planning. She assumed public pressure would beat quiet preparation. She assumed I was reactive. I wasn't. When she left that day, she didn't slam the door. She nodded once, a small, contained acknowledgement. My son and I still speak, carefully, honestly. Their marriage, that's theirs to navigate. But one thing changed permanently. He no longer sees me as a soft landing, and she no longer sees me as an obstacle. They see me as something else now, prepared. She thought slapping me at her wedding would secure a $500,000 house. What it actually secured was a lifetime of understanding exactly where the boundaries are. And some lessons are far more expensive than property.